and I'm going to go to my browser. And so we're kind of working on this like P5 intro. I was just kind of like going over some basic shapes and stuff like that and colors. And eventually what we're working towards is recreating an artwork. And I'll do a quick demo of that as well before I submit the project. Um, I want to bring up my sketch that I was working on last time. So I'm going to go to the editor, and the easiest way to do this, I'm just going to open a new tab and go to editor.p5js.org, and you can see my browser like remembers that I've been there, so I could just hit enter once it comes up. But if you also want to find it, you can just click on the P5 editor link here, and that'll take you there as well. And then I think there's a link on the Blackboard page as well. Let me double check. Um, oh, there's no link to the editor, but you can go to the course schedule, and there's a link from there. So anyway, I'm back at the P5 editor. That's where I'm going to be spending most of my time during this class. So I'm going to click login and log in here. Just ignore that. And I'm going to go to File and go to Open and find the sketch that I started last time. So here we go, P5 Intro Fall 2022. So I'll just click on that, and it's going to open up in my editor window. And I'm going to increase my font size a little bit to make this easier for you guys to see. And let's see, where did we leave off? So we had a orange background, we had a circle with a kind of bluish purplish color, and then we had another shape, a rectangle, that has a stroke, a white stroke, and a same fill. So we actually have covered a decent amount. I just want to show you guys a few more things before I do the example assignment for this week. And those things are mainly shapes. I'm going to go over a few different shapes, and then I think we've actually covered everything we need to cover in terms of colors. But I may go over more color stuff if I think it would be useful. So I want to have the reference open to see what different types of shapes are possible. And I'm just going to show you guys that there's kind of these like two basic categories of shapes when it comes to P5 that work slightly differently. And so I want to give you guys an example of that. So I'm going to go to the reference. And under the reference, there's a whole section for shape. So if I click on shape, it's going to bring me down here to this shape area. And you can see under here, under 2D primitives, this is what we're going to focus on today. We can do some of this other stuff later, maybe, like curves and vertexes and 3D primitives. If you want to look at that stuff, there, we've looked at with these reference pages, something you might be useful is like using begin shape or something like that. So if you click on there, you can see how it works, and you can see some examples of code. And so you don't necessarily have to not use these different shape types. But for today, since we're just getting started, I'm going to focus on these 2D primitives. And what I want to talk about really quickly is the difference between how P5 considers a few different types of shapes. So we already looked at the circle and the rectangle, and those kind of work similarly as each other. And then there's some other shapes in here like the line and the quad and the triangle that work a little bit differently. So I'm gonna draw some stuff to just kind of show you guys what I mean, and then I'll do some code examples. Um, I'm just gonna pause for a second. Any questions before I keep going? Is everybody familiar with the editor and what we set up so far? Okay, sweet. If anything comes up that looks unfamiliar or you haven't seen before, just let me know in the chat, or you can go on mic whenever you feel like it. Just feel free to interrupt me at any point. But it looks like most people are good with what we're doing. So
Professor,
yeah.
just one thing. I think it's on my side. My internet's kind of like making it, or like I'm not able to hear you properly because you're breaking up. So if I have to leave the chat, well, the video and come back in, it's okay, right?
Yeah, I'm recording, so if you need to review it
Okay.
later, you can do that. And if you want to like reset your connection or something like that, that's totally fine. I may not even notice if I'm
Okay.
on the other
Thank you.
window, but yeah, that's no problem. Okay. So yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions as I go over this stuff. Um, so what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to draw a little bit. Hopefully you guys can see this. I think this should work. I'm just going to open up my little annotation tool. Okay, so I'm going to draw on top of this drawing a little bit. If you guys don't see this, let me know. But I think this should go through. Okay, so what I've done so far is a circle and a rectangle. And the other shapes that kind of fit in this category are the arc, which is something that kind of looks like this. It looks like a little Pac-Man. And I think that might be it actually. Let's see. What's the other one? Square, rectangle. Square and rectangle are the same thing. So we don't have to go over that. Circle and ellipse are also the same thing. An ellipse is like a circle, but it can be wider than it is tall. So yeah, so those are the kinds of shapes. That's an ellipse. Those are the kind of shapes that all have two parts to them. They have an origin. Okay, so an origin, and then they have a size, like a width and a height, or how big they are. So like the circle, the origin is in the middle here, and then we set the diameter, which determines how big the circle is. For the rectangle, the origin point is up here, and then we set the width and the height, and that determines how big the shape is. So if we want to move the shape, we really just have to move the origin, and the rest of the shape moves with it. So that's one way of creating shapes where you have a point that's an origin that's like an XY, and then you have a size that might be like a diameter or a width or a height, depending on what type of shape you're creating. So those are one category. The other category are shapes that are created just by using points. And so examples of this are like a line, a triangle, or a quad, which is like a weird rectangle essentially. So to draw a line in P5, we're going to do this in code in a second. We actually have to choose 2 points, and then P5 will draw a line in between. And the thing that makes this different is that if I want to move the line, if I move this point, like over here, it's not going to move my whole line. It's just going to draw a new line like that. So if I want to move my points, I have to take both points and move them somewhere else. So I'd have to like move them up like that. So there's a few different types of shapes that work like this. There's a line, a triangle is 3 points. So that one is the trickiest a lot of the time. I'll do an example of that in a second. So with a triangle, it may look like it has a center, but it doesn't really have a center. It just has 3 points. And if we want to move the triangle, we have to move all three of the points. And then the quad is 4 points. And P5 again is just going to connect those points. So there's no center to these types of shapes. And when it comes to 2D shapes, those are basically the two types that we have. So we've already drawn a circle and a square. Let's draw some lines and some triangles to give examples of this. Um, and so after my square, I'm going to draw a line. So to draw a line, as I mentioned, I need two different points. And the way that P5 organizes it is it gives us the first coordinate first and then the second coordinate next. So if I click on this line, you can see there's 4 numbers here. And this first number is the X position over here. And the second number is the Y position, like how tall, how far it is from the top. And then the third number is this X all the way over here, like how far it is this way on horizontal. And then the 75 at the end is how far that one is from the top. So they're grouped together. There's this point and then there's this point. So let's draw a point that just goes across my whole, or a line that just goes across the whole canvas. So I'll start at 0, 0, and then the height of my canvas, or sorry, the width of my canvas is 600, and the height of my canvas is 400. So if I run that code, now I have this big line going across my canvas. And notice that the line is just white. So with a line, there's no fill, it's just stroke. There's nothing on the inside of a line because it's just 2 points in space. So that's my whole line. And so if I want to move that, like if I move the X, notice that it just moves that first point. The second point stays in the same place. Same thing if I move my Y down here. I'm just moving one point. The second point isn't going anywhere. So then if I go over here and I make my line a little bit shorter and, go over here. And so if I move the points of the line, I'm not moving the whole line itself. I'm moving each individual point, and then P5 is kind of moving stuff around for me. So I'm going to draw a couple more lines. Let's draw some lines that intersect with this line. So if I want to draw a line that intersects, let me get my drawing pad again. Okay, so let's clear this. So let's say I want to draw, so this point of the line here is the same as what I see down here. Let's get a different color for that. Let's go with pink. Okay, so this is the first point, and that's the second point. So they usually refer to it as x1, y1, and x2, y2. So this first point over here is 100 on X and 300 on Y. And that looks pretty reasonable, right? Like this looks like it's about 100 pixels, and this is much more pixels. It's about 300 pixels. Well, it's exactly 300 pixels. Whereas over here, this is 500 on the X, and it's the same 300 on the Y. So that's why the line is going straight across, because these two Y values are exactly the same. So that makes a straight line horizontally. So let's say I want to make a perpendicular line here. That means my X value would stay the same. So it would be 100 at the top, and it would also be 100 at the bottom. But what changes is the Y. So for this point, I would want it to be a little bit less than 300. So let's do like 250 to start. And then I would change the Y, I'd go up. So let's go up to 350, and let's see what the result of that is. So as I mentioned, X is going to stay the same. So I start at 100. Y is going to change. So I'm going to go from 250 on Y. X is still 100, and then 350 for the second Y. And so there we go. We get a nice little intersecting line. So again, if the Y values stay the same, like in this first line, we're going to get a straight line horizontally. If the X values stay the same, like in this line, we're going to get a vertical line. So if I want to match this line over here, that's really easy to do. I don't really have to do any math. I just have to know what I'm looking at. So this first line starts at 100 and it goes to 500. So if I want to copy this, I'm just going to copy this line and paste. And right now it looks the same because I didn't change anything. But if I move the X all the way to the other side to 500, okay, we can see the first point go over there, and then we can see the second point go over there. So now I've got this like weird sort of like seesaw thing that I'm creating. Okay, so those are my lines. So keep in mind, if I don't have a stroke, I don't have a line. So if I do like no fill here, or sorry, no stroke, whoops. So if I do no stroke here, there's no line. I need a stroke for a line. I can change the stroke if I want that to be a different color. Maybe I'll copy this color I had before. So I'll copy and paste that. So I can change the stroke color if I want a different color stroke, but I have to have some stroke to have a line. Okay, I'm gonna take that out because I kind of liked the way it looked before, although I'm not really drawing anything. I'm just kind of throwing some random shapes up here. So now I'm gonna show a triangle and then we'll move on. Sorry, did somebody have a question?
Yeah, when you copied the line, did was it like the regular way or is there like a shortcut to do it?
Oh, good point. Sorry, sometimes I do stuff really fast and I don't explain what I'm doing. So yeah, so when it comes to I'll go over more of these things as we learn the editor a little bit better. But there's a lot of little shortcuts in most text editors. So, for example, usually when I want to copy something, I have to like select it with the mouse. So I'd have to like select this whole thing and then like go and oh, copy isn't even an option here. Why isn't copy an option? Oh, because this isn't. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so I'd usually have to copy, or I could hit Control C and then Control Paste. But with code, usually the editor has built-in stuff for that. So for example, I can really easy, if I'm just on the line, so look at my cursor, I'm moving up and down. If I'm just on a line and I hit Control C, it's going to copy that line. So even though I haven't selected the whole line, it still knows where I am. And so if I hit Control C, it's going to copy, and then I can hit Control V and paste. I can also just hit Control X to get rid of a whole line, and it just does that. I don't have to select, like usually if you're like in Word or something like that, you have to use your mouse to select the whole thing. But when we're writing code, we're usually using the keyboard, and most coders don't really want to like switch back and forth between the keyboard and the mouse all the time. So there's a lot of little shortcuts that will help you not have to do that. One of my favorite ones is you can actually select multiple lines of text. So let's say, for example, I wanted to change both of these 100s here at the same time. I can hold Control and Shift and, or wait, maybe it's something else on Windows. Alt and Shift? No. Window Shift? Nope. Uh-oh. Okay. Maybe it's just Alt? No. Maybe it's Control and, there we go. Okay, so it's Control and Alt. So I can hit Control and Alt at the same time and then hit down. And now I have two cursors and I'm on two lines. So I can delete both of those 100s, put in a 400. Now it looks kind of weird because I didn't really know what that was going to do, but I can set it back. So, whoops, there's a lot of little shortcuts that you can do. And then if I want to get out of that, I just hit the escape key and I go back to one cursor, and now my sketch looks normal. So sometimes if I use it, if I do something that looks like really fast, I'm probably using a shortcut that you might not be familiar with. So I'll try to remember to say what I'm doing when I do that. But if something looks weird, just yeah, ask a question like that, and I'll go over it. Uh,
Sorry, another question.
yeah.
Um, so when you copy the lines, why is it like different components, or is it just too technical, like just the way it is?
Like, why are there multiple lines?
I thought when you copy the line, you just put basically it's the same line, but it's in the same place. I've seen that it's different components.
Like the different numbers, or where they show up on
Yeah,
the screen?
the different numbers.
Yeah, so just keep in mind what the numbers mean. So that's kind of the tricky part. So when I'm writing a line, the first number is the position of the x of the first point, and the second number is the position of the y for the first point. And then we just go to x2, y2. Okay, so it is tricky. Like it's not super intuitive all the time. So sometimes it just takes a little bit of getting used to. But basically, what that maps to is like this line, this point is the x1, y1, and this point is the x2, y2. And those are, so there's four total numbers. The first number is the x from here to here, just how far over that line is. The second number is the y, how far do I go from the top of the sketch down to the y? And that creates this point. The second point is the same thing, but it's these second two numbers. So it's this one and this one. And
Oh, okay.
that's the same
Sorry,
thing.
I got misunderstood. Yeah, I get it now. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, so I'm just basically telling the 2 points where to go, and then P5 draws a little line for me in between them. So yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, let's make the triangle because that one is even crazier. So a triangle has six total numbers, which represent 3 points on the screen. So it looks like this, and we're basically just describing pairs of points. So it's going x, y, x, y, x, y. So we have a triangle, and so let's make a triangle. It's really hard to place the triangle correctly the first time you try it. So I'm just going to try to make a triangle that's like centered above this like weird line thing that I'm making. So we want to start at 100, and I'll start at 100 on y. And so that's the first point. And then the second point, I'm gonna kind of just guess that it's in the middle of the screen. So it's gonna be at like 300. And I'm just going to stick it at 300y for now, just so it's good with the triangle to make things far away, so then you can see how close you are, and then you can change the points. And so my last point, I want to move. So I did like here and here somewhere. I want to go up here. So X is going all the way over to like 500, but Y is now going back up. So I'm going to try 100 on the Y, and let's see what that looks like. So that looks pretty good. It's not exactly what I wanted, but it's pretty close. I'm going to put no fill here so that I can see through my little triangle. Okay, so I actually just wanted it to be a little bit closer to the top. So I'm going to try 50 for that Y. So that looks pretty good. Let's try 50 for this Y. Okay, that's a little bit closer to what I wanted. I don't know. I don't really know what I'm making here. I'm just kind of throwing stuff on there. So this looks good enough for now. So yeah, that's how I make a triangle. I do 1, 2, 3 points, and then the P5 will just connect them for me. And then if I move the point, again, I'm not moving the whole triangle, I'm just moving 1 point of the triangle. And then I have no fill, so there's no fill here, but you can have a fill on a triangle, just like you can on some of the other shapes. Um, okay, so I think that's everything I want to do. There's one more thing that I want to show you guys, and then I'm going to do my version of the first assignment. So the last thing that I want to show you guys while we're here is just the difference. You can see that there's like a difference between my rectangle and my circle that I want to talk about for a second. And this is where the origin point of the shape is. So I'm going to delete all this stuff. So my circle, the origin point is right here in the middle, and the diameter is like this. So that's how big the circle is. And then it just kind of draws a circle around that middle. Whereas the rectangle, even though the circle and the rectangle, they have the same x value, the circle x is 300 and the rectangle x is also 300, but the circle is centered and the rectangle is not. And that's because the rectangle, by default, its origin point is the top left corner. So whatever that point is for this rectangle, it's 300, 300. And then the 50 gets added this way, and it gets added down this way. But we can change that. That's just a default. We can change that if we want to. And so the way that we change that is using the function rect mode. So before I draw my rectangle, I can say rect mode. So it uses our camel case. It's rect, which is short for rectangle, followed by mode with the capital M. And so the rect mode, this is a thing that is going to look a little bit weird because we haven't used these before, but P5 has some built-in numbers, and we'll see a bunch of them throughout the semester, and they all kind of look like this. But sometimes those values are all caps because that represents a value that doesn't change. It's called a constant. So let me put a note here. This is a constant. So a constant value in code is always all capitalized. So the value for rect mode, if we want it to be in the center, is center, but it's all caps to represent that this is a value that never changes. Okay, so now when I put that rect mode center, now see that my rectangle actually matches the same way as my circle. This origin point is still in the middle of the rectangle, but now instead of drawing all the way to the right and all the way down, instead it's distributing the width evenly and the height evenly. So it's centering everything. Um, and so if I want to make my rectangle look a little bit bigger, I can increase the size, say 100, see what that looks like, maybe 300 to match. Oh, that's a little too big. Let's do 200. Oh yeah, 200 matches my circle. Um, let's stick with 100. I could also move it down. So now that it's centered, it's not, the Y moved up a little bit, so I might want to move it down to like 350. Yeah, so I'm kind of making this like weird little robot looking alien type guy, but it's, kind of looking kind of interesting. But yeah, that's basically the last little bit that I wanted to show you guys. There's a lot more that we can do with code, but we're gonna learn it bit by bit so that we don't, overwhelm too much at the beginning. Um, So yeah, I'm gonna actually stop recording and I'll give you guys a second